216 and the Secrets of the Universe by Omar Angulo. Read by Omar Angulo. Dedication for my brother. Acknowledgements to all who have shared their stories with me and trusted me with something so sacred. To all who chose not to judge me, despite it maybe being easy to do. To the spirit world and creator for granting me whatever this is. To my brother for coming back to show me. To my parents for being so brave. To my family who have been a blessing in this life, I thank you. Prologue. Since first publishing the book on March 22 of 2023, I was immediately led down a new rabbit hole. Everything happened very quickly beginning the very following day on March 23rd of 2023, and by April 4th of 2023 exactly 13 days later, 6 new chapters had been added to this book. I have left everything from the first edition of this book exactly as it was, including the introduction. Somehow, even as I wrote the book, I knew I would be making a revised edition and mention it. I just had no idea it would be so soon. The reason for leaving it as such is that I wanted to show everything in real time. I have never been someone to get fixed on an idea so much that I cannot be proven wrong. In fact, I welcome this. I remember when I was young and at the time, just because of my knowledge of the Bible, many might have put me into the category of a Bible-thumping Christian, even though that was farthest from the truth. One day I was walking when someone wanted to stop me and talk Bible with me. I said sure, but I was kind of in a hurry as well. This young man caught me off guard because I thought he was just going to be one of those people trying to convince you that the Bible is real, which I probably needed less convincing of than most Christian people. However, he took it in a whole other direction. He began to ask me if I believed the Bible was saying there was only one God. I answered yes. Then why does it say there are multiple gods, he asked. Why does it say Elohim, plural for God, and not Eloah, that is the singular form of it? I remember getting angry and brushing him off like, I don't have time for this BS, as I quickly walked away and went on with my day. When I got home, I looked it up and found him to be correct. This was new. I was confused but intrigued. I couldn't look at it from a zealous standpoint, but rather from the eyes of a curious child. What does this mean? Since finding out all of this new information, which was a lot, I would say I've included maybe 1/16 of everything that I've found. Meaning, for every 96 things I found, I've included 6 because there is just so much information and I've still managed to write a whole book and then a revised version of it. The title of the book now has a lot more meaning and feels more accurate. Funny that was the name I was guided to for the book, 216 and the Secrets of the Universe. Although I still try to touch on the key points, or the book would have been 5 times as long, I'm sure when you're ready, new doors will open and you will begin your own very lengthy adventure. Enjoy. Introduction. As you begin this journey with me, I only ask that you make it to the end. Nothing will truly make sense unless you make it to the end. I do not pretend to have all the answers as to why I was given this knowledge, or why I am consistently given messages from the spirit world. But if you must make sense of it, I would only be able to present you with this simple analogy or parable. If you had 2 children, one was dependable and you knew you could count on them, whilst the other was not, and had a track record of forgetting to do even the simplest of tasks, which one would you rely on for something important that needs to get done? Would it be the reliable one or the forgetful one? To go even deeper into this question, I will present you with a personal example. On August 5th of 2022, my father and I had a very interesting conversation, decades in the making. I remember the date because it was my father's 72nd birthday. I wanted to understand why after all these years he still didn't believe in the spiritual despite the endless proof I had shown him. I shared a story with him about when I asked God, the Great Spirit, Creator, or however you may refer to your higher power, a very specific question. During this time, me being around Christian people, I believed that as long as I asked this question inside my head, only God could hear me and no demons or spirits of any kind would be able to intercept this question. So that day I went inside my room, locked the door, turned off the light, kneeled down and asked the question inside my head. Upon asking this question, I let it be known that if it was answered, I would never doubt again. The next day I went to work at a new job I had started a few cities away. A man I had met but never really had any kind of conversation with approached me. He said he didn't want me to think he was a weirdo or anything, but he had a dream and believed the message was for me. I instantly got excited and said, "Yes, tell me." The man then looked at me strange as if he was wondering why I wasn't freaked out by it, and then proceeded to give me the message from the dream. It was the response to the question I had asked the Creator. As promised, I never doubted again nor needed proof that there was a God, higher power, or the spiritual. After this, I asked my father, what would be the minimum the Creator or God could do for him to believe? What sign would you want the Creator to show you? I asked. My dad looked me dead in the face and said, "Nothing. I don't want to see anything." I then laughed and said, "Wow. So you're saying that you just don't care. Even if they show you something, you're not interested in believing." He answered that I was correct. No matter what, his mind was made up and he was not interested in believing. Instantly, I knew that I had just wasted decades trying to convince my father, who had made a decision long ago. Why I never thought to ask him before, I had no idea. But it was the aha moment of aha moments. His answer lifted a huge burden from my shoulders from that moment forward. Not only did I not need to prove anything to him, but nor anyone else as well. I even LOL'd literally. I understood instantly on a deeper level that it has never been my job to convince people, just share my stories to help those that are already in the process to further understand. For some reason, because it was my father, I felt that I needed to prove the gift to him, which I will address later on in this book. But this gave me some strange closure which I had long searched for. So why am I writing this book? Simply because I feel the evidence is enough that anyone with a logical or spiritual mind cannot deny its existence. That the messages I am given in the spirit world translate to the physical world and can be seen by all clear as day. The proof of life after death? That some things are pre-written into the fabrication of the universe? Or perhaps that a higher power is in constant communication, serving as a guiding light in hopes that someone will retrieve the signal. You can decide for yourself which one is true, because to me they all are. Since movies have played a huge role in my life as far as bringing messages and synchronicities, I will give you this quote from one of my favorite movie series before you continue forward. "Theatricality and deception are powerful agents to the uninitiated, but we are initiated, aren't we, Bruce?" Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. Chapter 1. The Gift. The first premonition that I remember having dates back to when I was 5 years old. We went to a movie theater, and not only on the way there, but during the movie, I was 100% sure that we had already seen the movie. My family began to mock me. "Oh yeah? What happens next?" In a smart-ass kind of way, they would ask. Of course I couldn't answer, but I just knew we already had done everything we were doing. Deja vu times 10, I would later call these experiences. After that, I can't say that I remember anything through my childhood, so we'll fast forward to my teenage years. Picture the fast forwarding of a VHS tape. When I was in high school, I became interested in rapping my sophomore year of high school. I was also kicked out of school a couple months into my sophomore year for simply being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Of course, once you begin this spiritual journey, you begin to understand that everything happens for a reason, but we'll get into that later. The third day of my junior year of high school, I was in a big car accident that left me hospitalized for a week. I was allowed to go home after that, but the recovery process took some time. I was left with a big scar across my forehead that I later grew self-conscious about. I would hear other students refer to me as the guy with the scar. I will have to write about all of my experiences with, as the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. Or as some call it nowadays, manifesting. But we'll move forward for now. All of this is important, but I will skip through most of it and leave it for another book because the focus of this one is, as the title reads, 216. Somewhere between that car accident in my junior year and my senior year of high school, I approached a friend who also rapped. We decided to form a group together, and that's when things really began to get weird. We were both very creative and motivated, so we began writing a lot of songs together. Also, if I had not been kicked out of school, I probably would have never started hanging out with this friend. Interesting how life works. I believe during our time as a group, we wrote at least 300 songs within a couple of years, although we only got to release one album. The reason this got weird was because I began to notice that sometimes I would write things in songs that would come true.
I seen Lorraine, she was walking down the street and had a dirt teardrop rolling down the cheek. She once was a good girl, now she old upset. and begging people just to get it hit. The story told it's so, yeah, it's way too common. See too many people turning to that door with problems to dodge 'em, but they don't go away. And slowly day by day, yeah, they start to fade away.
Of course, I brushed it off to coincidence or deja vu at first, but later, after many years, I realized that somehow, some way, I was channeling messages of things to come. Of course, in hindsight, just to touch briefly on the be careful reference, I would later grow confused as to, did the things I write about happen because I was channeling a premonition, or was I somehow manifesting them by writing them down? That was a very scary thought for a young me to handle. Over the years, my gifts grew stronger. I began having premonitions, sometimes daily. And when I was in relationships, I would astral travel and see things whomever I was dating would have probably preferred for me not to see. I know now how freaky that must have been for whomever I was dating, but it would only happen when they were lying to me about something. One thing I often forget to mention is that I never asked for anything. Even as I'm writing this, I don't believe I ever asked to see what anyone else was doing. In fact, I'm certain. Or for the numbers to hit the jackpot and win the lottery, or anything for that matter. I often feel I might have preferred an ignorant is bliss approach to life, but it looked like whomever was watching over me didn't appreciate it when someone was trying to make me look like a fool. I remember a funny incident once that happened with a girl I was dating at the time. I had a strange dream about her and some guy. What made it stand out to me was that it was the first time I had ever dreamt a first and last name to a person. For some reason, the spirit world chose to give me the first and last name to this individual that she had some kind of correspondence with. I had gone to the mechanic shop whom I had been going to for years and happened to be a neighbor. We also shared the same name. For those that aren't aware, and I'm not sure if this goes only for those of Mexican descent that speak Spanish, but when you share a name with someone, you refer to them as tocayo for masculine and tocaya for feminine. This was how I always greeted him and he greeted me. Hey, tocayo. Anyways, back to the story. While I was waiting there, still in the morning time, this girl called me. I still had the images of her and this guy fresh in my head. Although I wasn't shown that she was engaging in any kind of activity with him, there was a sneaky element to it in the dream I recall. I must have answered with a slight irritated tone because she picked up on it immediately. She asked me what was wrong, which I instantly replied to with, "Who is so-and-so?" Her reaction was priceless. After a quick stumble of her words, because she was probably in as much shock as I was about the situation, she tried explaining nervously. He just emailed me yesterday. I hadn't spoken to him in a year, and he just messaged me out of nowhere, but I haven't replied. I tried to remain sounding angry, but in all honesty, I was more excited about my new superpowers that I wanted to give off a woohoo. In a firm voice, I simply reminded her that lying to me wasn't going to work. You see, I told you. I truly do appreciate now that she wasn't freaked out about my abilities enough to head for the hills running. Most of the time. As time went on, my gifts only grew and I began to trust them more. I started expressing and sharing them more with others. I told people that I dreamed the future or just saw things in real time like astral traveling. I would dream of a friend I hadn't spoken to in years, then wake up to a missed call from them. I had even met a woman in another state online that I began to speak frequently with. We eventually decided she would fly to see me, but unfortunately my ex popped back in the picture and I regretfully informed this woman. Of course, the situation with my ex didn't last and I reached out to this woman to let her know what had happened. We began talking again, but I quickly dreamt of her kissing some guy. I asked her about it, but she denied it. I brushed it off and figured it was just a dream. About a month later, this woman that lived almost halfway across the country admitted that what I dreamt had been true. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't even the slightest bit angry and laughed out loud about it. She nervously giggled back. She began to tell me that it was a guy she had just met and they made out, but it didn't mean anything. She did later end up marrying him. This was a first, or at least that I was aware of. To this woman, omitting this information seemed logical because she was more serious about me and didn't want to ruin what we had, but that wasn't the point. I had now either astral traveled or had dreamed about someone states away and it was correct. I was excited. I understood her seeing someone else because I decided to go back to my ex. Big mistake, by the way. So I wasn't the least bit bothered about that. I was more concerned that she made me doubt my gifts when I was still in the process of nurturing and growing them. This would later become a problem in my life where people made me doubt my gifts, but I'll leave that for another story as well. I eventually began to search out others like me. Throughout my younger years, the only reference I had was the Bible for some of the things I had begun to experience, which most people at church were uncomfortable speaking about, despite it being in the book they claimed to believe in. Very ironic. So because of that, I stayed away from church and just read the Bible on my own. It was during that time that my connection with the spiritual world had one of the largest growth spurts that I experienced during my whole spiritual journey. I thought that because I was searching without anyone telling me anything, I was being rewarded. Like if the Great Spirit in the sky was saying, "Because of your blind faith, the veil has been lifted." I even began seeing this Great Spirit in visions and figured it was God himself. When social media, meaning MySpace, hit, things started to slowly change. I would see someone post something about being psychic, and I would instantly message them. Of course, they would say they were only speaking figuratively, and I would be disappointed. But maybe it was just a precursor to what was beginning to peek out over the horizon. That one day in the future I would grow a network of others like me through social media. But this was still years away.